an oral history interview recording with Volusia County educator Alzada Fowler. The interviewer is Jackie Kirsch, and I'm a volunteer with West Volusia Historical Society. Today is November the 16th, 2016, and we are recording in the Henry A. DeLand House Museum's front parlor. Alzada, it's so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
Could we talk just a little bit about statistics first?
Okay.
When did you first come to West Volusia?
Well, it's a long story on that, but when my mother passed, the family was living in Fort Lauderdale. So my father had 4 children. He needed to get closer to his family. So that's how we got back here to Volusia County.
And you were born where?
Well, I was born in a little town not very far from Greenville, Florida, which is in North Florida, and that's close to Monticello, Tallahassee, out on a farm.
In the Panhandle.
And my father and mother had gotten married, and then he moved to Fort Lauderdale because of a job. He was offered a job as a plumber's helper, and this is in the year of 1936.
It's coming out of the Depression.
So when it was time for my mother to deliver me, she wanted to get back to her mother that was still on the farm. So she came out went back to the farm, and I was born, which we thought, my mother and father told me that I was born on May 23rd, 1936, but it's a little story that goes with that.
Okay, what's the story?
Well, when I received, as I got older and became an adult, and I saw my birth certificate, it had June 1, 1936. But the family Bible and what they had always told me was May 23rd, 1936. And I figured it out after a while by being born at the farm. There was a midwife. She didn't have a car probably. So finally when she got a ride to go into town to record this, it took about a week. So she recorded it on that date. So all my other papers and everything had to be changed to, and that's what I used is the one that was recorded on my birth certificate.
So you celebrate in June rather than May.
I do both of them.
And how many children were in the family?
I had 2 brothers, and I've got a baby sister. Okay.
And you were the kind of in the middle. The 2 brothers were older, and then you, and then your
the oldest
sister.
There was the one brother older, and then I came along, and then another brother, and then one girl came after that.
And then after you were born, you said you went back. She went back, of course, to where
Fort
you were
Lauderdale.
living.
Right. And this is where I started elementary school in Fort Lauderdale in 1st grade. And my mother became pregnant with the baby girl, and she delivered that child in December the 25th, 1942. And 4 months later, August 1943, my mother passed. And I was like 6.5 years old. So, as I said before, that he said, I need to go back home.
Yes.
Where I have family that can help me with the children. So he brought us back to Volusia County, and then he stayed on there for a while working until he could make enough money to come here and build a house for us. So, but we had loving family here, had a grandmother and aunts, uncles that looked out for us.
Yes.
So I finished first grade here and enrolled in the Lake Helen School. And this is where I finished elementary school all the way up to sixth grade here in Lake Helen.
And now you married whom?
Okay, when I was coming home from college, January at 1959, I had completed my course at Florida A&M University, and I was riding the Greyhound bus, and I had a layover in Jacksonville. And as I was sitting there, I had a big book that I had to make for my internship class. And so the gentleman came by and looked at it, and he said, "Oh, what is that?" So we talked a few minutes, and then I found out that I had gone to college with a lot of the students that he had graduated with from Tampa, Florida. So we had a lot in common there because he was asking me about different ones, and I, said, "Yes, I know them." And he asked me for my address. So I gave him my address, and that was in January. Well, the week leading up to Valentine's Day, I got a card from him. Just a friendly card, said, "I'm the guy that you met in the bus station." So I responded by thank you, and we started writing back and forth. So that was Roosevelt Fowler. And we were married for 56 years. His demise was this year, June the 8th. But we had a very happy life together. We have two from that our marriage. We have two children: Mark Kevin Fowler and Sonia Deirdre Fowler. And from those two children, Mark gave us 4 grandchildren, and Sonia 2 grandchildren. And
their names are?
Mark's children, the oldest is Shakara Flowers, and Tiffany Fowler, Clarence Fowler, Mark Elman Fowler, and then Sonia's children, Alana Fowler, Area Smith. And Shakara is living in Atlanta, and she is a teacher like I was. And there's a story about that.
We'll talk about that later.
So she and her husband have given us 2 great-grandchildren, Carson Flowers and Carter Flowers.
Okay. That sounds like a wonderful family.
They are, and we're expecting the ones from Atlanta to come down at Christmas time.
Okay, we know your past history way back. Why don't we talk a little bit about your early school time? Because that was in the segregated South.
Yes.
You went to school at the Lake Helen School, which is now the Shoestring Theater.
Yes, you're right.
And what was that like?
Well, at that time, that was the segregated time, and our school was Lake Helen Elementary, and the other school on Lakeview was Lake Helen Public. And we had a principal, Seth Gore, and he taught a class, and he also did manual training to teach. But it wasn't for the girls; it was for the boys to learn how to make and cut things with the saws and all of that.
You probably took home ec.
I guess we did. But I always loved school and really loved to read. One thing that I was disappointed about at the time. There was not a lot of books that I could get that I could read. Hopkins Hall was like the library, but we African Americans could not go to that building that was used for a library. So whatever books we had in our school, and there wasn't not many extra other than the assigned readers for you to have. And a lot of our reading, there was a newspaper called the Pittsburgh Courier, the Chicago Defender, where somehow that paper would come into the neighborhood. Some would bring, I guess like paper boys or paper men would bring it in.
Yes.
So that was one other that we could read. But in our schools, I just thought, why do we have to have these old books all the time? Because we could see the names of the other students who had used these books. But even though we may have had the old books and the old desk, we learned a lot because our teachers didn't play around when it came to our education. And they know that they had the backing of our parents because so many of them, as my father, never had an opportunity to get beyond second grade.
Oh.
So they were very serious about you going to school and learning what you're supposed to. And there was no playing around with that because the word could easily get to them that you didn't have such a good day.
Yes.
But in our schools, which I want to just talk about a lady that really inspired me to be a teacher. It was Modestine Jones. I had her in the 4th, 5th, and 6th grade. And another teacher taught the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade. Mm-hmm. But Miss Modestine Jones was a very good pianist. She taught us, if you want to take piano lessons after school, you could. She would teach you that for free. She organized a chorus that we would sing at churches, and we'd visit other schools that we would sing. And she didn't just keep us in the classroom. She would let us walk outside and be in the environment to see what we could find and learn there.
Oh, she sounds wonderful.
Like the pine trees, the straw. She showed us how we could make things from that. And just by us being out in the rural area, we could have our own garden.
Yes.
And so when I got to high school, I just said, I'm getting close to finishing school. Now I want to be a teacher just like Mrs. Modestine Jones. And she was my hero. And after I finished college, I had an opportunity to go to her home in Daytona and to really sit down and talk with her and tell her what a difference she made in my life.
That's wonderful.
And she was my mentor, and I just really always loved her.
That is wonderful. Do you know where she was from originally? Was she a Southerner, or did she come down from?
I think she was a Southerner. I never knew where she started off. I just knew she lived in Daytona.
Uh-huh.
And you know what? She would ride the bus to come out to Lake Helen until she was able to get a car. And there was always someone in the neighborhood that had a house that would accommodate her, because she would come like maybe on Sunday afternoon.
Uh-huh.
And she stayed through Friday, and then she'd go back to Daytona and then come back. And my uncle and his wife had one of the houses that remind you of some of the houses on Euclid. Mm-hmm. Was one of the nicer homes there in the African American community, and they would take her in because it had a two-story house.
Yes.
And so she had a nice place to stay.
We take cars so for granted now. We don't think about the
How it
distance
was
between
then.
Daytona and Lake Helen.
Right.
A problem.
It was a
Let's go back just a minute. You were talking about not having books and not having a library in the school. How did you know that you couldn't use Hopkins Hall?
Well, when there was segregation, your parents kind of prepared you for that. They let you know the do's and the don'ts, so you knew.
And did they tell you any reason, or just
They just
that's the
was
way
said
it is?
that only the whites can use that.
Interesting.
I think they tried to help to keep us safe,
Yes.
and so no one would. If we did something that was out of place, then we wouldn't be hurt or embarrassed, or someone said something to us that would hurt our feelings.
Yes. Did you interact any with the students at the public school, or was it totally separate
It was
communities? And
totally separate. I don't remember communicating with them at all. We didn't come together at all. Now, there was a baseball team in our community called the Lake Helen Clowns, and they played their games on the weekends. But these were working men, and after they would get off from work, then they would do some practicing, and so that on Saturday they would have games, and on Sunday, and the teams would travel around from one little community to the other. Well, my brother was on one of the teams, and he told me that on the 4th of July, that the white team and the black team would come together down on, there was a field there on Ohio.
mm-hmm.
And they would come together under that one flag for the 4th of July and play a game together.
You were in elementary at Lake Helen Elementary, and where did you move to from there?
Once the students from our school would catch the bus and be transported to Euclid High School in DeLand.
Yes.
And it was like junior high school. You would go there from 7th grade up until you graduated.
Yes.
Okay. And so I graduated from there in 1954, and I was the top person in my class of 44.
Valedictorian.
So I had to give the speech.
Do you remember what you said?
Oh, I really don't remember.
No.
I don't remember that speech.
But by then you knew you were going to college, didn't you?
Well, I was hoping that I would go to college because I had the year of 1954, before we graduated, our principal took 5 of us students to 2 of the colleges that was close by for us to take a look at it. And one was Bethune-Cookman, which was college at the time, which is university now.
Yes.
And Florida Memorial College in St. Augustine, which it is now in Miami, and it's Florida Memorial University. Well, he carried us there, and then he talked to us about it. What do you think about going to one of those? I said, my cousin and I said, no, we want to go to Florida A&M University, and which was college. No, it was university when we got there in 1954. And the reason why we said that, we had been there before, thanks to our 4-H leader, Miss Ida Pemberton.
Yes.
Being a 4-H club member, she did many things with us, taught us about sewing, taught us about canning, cooking, and she was another person that I loved so much. Well, in the summertime, we could go to Tallahassee and stay on the campus of Florida A&M University for a week, called short course. And we would have classes. we got a chance to mingle with other 4-H'ers from different counties in Florida, and we had talent shows at night, and it was just a nice experience. So that's where my cousin Joy Francis and I made up our mind that that's where we were going to college.
Ah, good recruitment too. What Florida A&M, even at that time, was accepting both young men and young women.
Yes.
That was correct.
Yes.
Because well, it was just shortly before that that the two other universities were segregated by male and female.
Right.
So
Yes.
A&M was ahead of its time.
We male and female.
What did you major in?
Elementary education because of Mrs. Modestine Jones. I wanted to be a teacher just like her.
Oh, yes. Then, what is anything about your college experience that you would like to remember?
Okay, I want to go back to the work studies because along the way there have been so many people that have influenced my life, and I want to bring that in.
Yes.
When I went to Florida A&M, my father was working for the fish groves, Burt Fish Groves here in the Lake Helen area, where the Daytona State is located now.
Right.
Lots of orange trees and all of that. So he was one of the grove workers. Well, the foreman, Mr. Melton, and his wife, Mrs. Melton, had told my dad that if I get in college, they wanted to help me. And when I got there and made a little money from the work studies, they would send me a check every month for like $54.
Oh.
Now that was room and board.
Yes, that was big
in
money
1954.
At that time. Exactly.
So they would send me a check to take care of my tuition. And their daughter at the time, Virgie, was over at FSU.
Uh-huh.
And she would come, if I needed anything, like it had gotten cold this time of the year, it was cooler there. Well, Virgie, mom sent money for her to buy me an overcoat. And at one time, I needed to go to the dentist, and Virgie came over and carried me to the dentist. And she had a car. And one of those times she came, she said, I'm going to take you over on my campus. And so I got in the car with her and we rode over, and she showed me around the campus over there. And the next year, after I had finished my freshman year and started my sophomore year, Mrs. Melton passed away. And I came home that the second semester of my sophomore year and worked so that I could maybe go back to the start of the new year. Well, Mr. Melton, the husband, came to me and he said, he called her Mama. Mama wanted you to continue college, and Grace, because he had married a new lady.
Yes.
And he said the same thing that we were doing, we're going to continue it.
Good.
So along the way, with their support and the money that my dad and people in the community would do for me, and then for 3 summers I went to Atlantic City, New Jersey, and worked in a hotel up there just about 2 blocks from the boardwalk.
Oh, that must have been different.
Yes. Well, I tell you what, when you crossed the Mason-Dixon line, things was different there. Where we couldn't go to Daytona Beach, when we got there and got on the boardwalk and walked down to the beach, we were there with everybody else.
Yes.
And that was different for us.
Yes.
We left the South sitting in the back of the bus, but when we got to Washington, D.C. to change, we were at the front of the bus. And one of those times I got right behind the driver and had my feet hauled up. Then, as soon as we crossed back,
You changed.
we had to change.
Yes.
But I was able to finish college through the goodness of persons that came along that really supported me. And that has been a part of my life, that how can I give back to help somebody else?
Yes.
And my motto has always been, if I can help somebody as I travel this way, then I know that my living will not be in vain.
It's a wonderful motto to have.
And I've tried to pass that on to my children and to my grandchildren.
Yes.
And I'm beginning to see some of those seeds are growing with them.
That's wonderful. So you finished college and met your husband-to-be on a bus.
Yes.
And where did you, when did you marry in sort of in context of that? After you finished college?
Yes.
And then where was your first teaching?
Okay, it started in the same school right here in Lake Helen where I had gone to school. I ended up having the 3 grades. And I was teaching the music. And also we had, by that time, they had gotten books that we took one of the rooms and made a library out of it. And we had, I was able to start getting books from people to go in that room for the library.
But the school was still segregated.
It's still segregated. And I was not, when the Supreme Court knocked down the separate but equal in 1954, Volusia County did not start at the integration here until 1966, 67. So I was hired in 1967. And at Lake Helen Public, there was a courageous principal, we call him Mickey, but Michael Westbury. And he came over in the summer of 1967 and told me that he would like to hire me to be the first grade teacher over at Lake Helen Public. And I agreed. And when after I had been at Lake Helen Public for a month, then he told me how he approached the parents. Because in the summer, in May, when the kindergartners were getting ready to go to first grade, he called in those kindergarten parents and told him what he wanted to do about hiring an African-American teacher. And they were asking him questions. They weren't too sure about it. Maybe, this is the first. And he told me that at the end of September, he said the parents came to him and told him that we're glad that you made that decision. So my experience that first year was a good experience. In the South, you may have heard of a lot of disturbances. People were angry and taking the children out of the schools and putting them in private schools and all that. But I did not experience that in Lake Helen. The community embraced me. August leading up to the opening of school, a white lady walked in my classroom as I was setting up, and she introduced herself to me and said, I will have a daughter in first grade, and I would like to volunteer if you would have me as homeroom mother.
Terrific.
I said, yes, you can be. And so she came back the next day and helped me in the classroom to clean and set up. And until she passed, she and I were best friends. And now today, when her daughter comes back, that I had her in first grade, she lives in Utah, but she has excuse me, family here, and she will come by and see me.
Oh, that's great.
She will come by and see me.
Certainly, your life demonstrates that no matter what the system, it's the people in it that really make the difference.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What was it like? Just teach. It was an integrated class.
Yes, yes.
How was it different from when you were teaching at the elementary school, Lake Helen Elementary?
Okay. One thing that was different about it, I started off with 35 children. It was 2 sets of twins in that 35.
Oh my goodness!
I didn't have a teacher's aide or anything at that time. No.
And how many had you had in your class at the other school?
At the other school with 3 grades, I probably had maybe about 20, 22. I don't think no more than 25.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. But with the cooperation from the parents and all, I really didn't have discipline problems. I don't know. It went along smoothly because I had volunteers that came in too that helped out.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And the difference I found that there was more materials there.
Yes.
Yeah. And we had more support. But the experience was very good.
And your relationship with the other teachers?
Oh, yeah. By being a small school, you soon develop into like a family.
Yes.
Yeah. Everybody looking out for each other. Yes. And at that time, we could still communicate with each other at recess time.
Yes.
We could take the children out and, that gives us a little chance to talk among ourselves.
What about your children? Did they all go to college?
My son, Mark, went to Florida A&M 2 years, and my brother had his own trucking business that he would haul furniture in throughout Florida. Well, he got sick. So my son Mark had worked with my brother in the summertime. So when he became ill, my son, said, I'm going to stop school and go help my Uncle Jimmy. So he dropped out.
Must have been difficult for you.
So he's always been someone who liked trucks. So even today, he's still doing that long distance trucking.
Yes.
Hauling furniture. In fact, he's out in Seattle right now.
Oh my goodness.
And Sonia went to college, and she finished the junior college here. Mm-hmm. And then she went to City College in Orlando, and she got a degree from there. And right now she is executive director at Assisted Living in Orange City.
Oh, so she's close to you.
Right. And my grandchildren, Shakara, she was in my first grade class now. And she drew a picture she saw a picture in a coloring book of a teacher. So she colored that picture, and then in the margin of that picture she wrote, this looks very interesting. I may want to be a teacher like my grandmother. Well, when she got to high school, that had changed. She started Florida A&M wanting to be a pharmacist. But when the science started kicking her around, she called her dad, my son, and said, this is too hard. So he said, what is your passion? You're always collecting children, and you always reading and helping your younger brothers and sisters. So she got into education and she loves it. After 3 years, she was teacher of the year for her school.
Oh,
And so she's a lead teacher now in a new school in 4th grade.
carrying on the tradition.
Yes, she's carrying it on. She loves it. And I have a grandson. He went to Florida A&M University. And when he graduated 2 years ago, he got an offer from ESPN. And this was one of his dream jobs. He had always said as a young man he loved sports.
Yes.
And he said, I would like to be an analyst on ESPN one of these days. And so he got his wish. And he's in the research department there.
That's great.
And the other grandson is working at Frontier here in DeLand. And Mark's other daughter, Tiffany, she is assistant manager at the new Publix in the deli. And Sonia's daughter is like loss prevention at Walmart, and the baby girl is trying to finish up at University of Central Florida. So those are the grands.
What you were telling me earlier about a group of young women who got together and are
Yes.
now celebrating an
Okay.
important anniversary.
Well, one of the greatest things that I think in my life that I've been able to help with and give back, in 1961, a group, 17 ladies came together in the West Volusia area and said half of these 17 were like teaching in the segregated school, 1961. And they said there are some needs that we could come together and address. And that group became the Electrolytes Charity Club Incorporated. And this year we're celebrating 55 years. And in 1962 we gave our first scholarship of $25. And as I may have said to you, that you could get in the bookstore with $25 and buy probably a little book.
Yes.
But no longer today. So we have been very fortunate with fundraising and donations that we are able now to give like $1,000, $1,500, and it had some years have been $2,000 to graduating students from DeLand High School that's in need. So when we total it all up, we probably give them maybe like $45,000 in scholarships.
That's amazing.
And then we see that what the students that have received that, many of them have really gone on to do well in their career. We have a lawyer, we have principals, we have teachers, we have pharmacists. So that is one thing that I am very proud to have been a part of, and I am the only active member still with the club.
Oh.
So I'm the emeritus. I don't have to get up and do any of the little extra things that I used to have to do. They tell me, you just sit down. This is you the queen, you sit.
It's pretty obvious that you can look back on a lot of wonderful experiences and some that were challenging. But if you had to say what was the one best experience of your life, what would you pick?
I've had some nice times.
Maybe would it be when you married? Would it be when you were the first teacher in an integrated school? Or when your first grandchild was born? Or when your great-granddaughter became
All of that
a
was
teacher?
a boom. All of that. One thing that I really enjoyed, because I joined a group called the Black Women's Health Conference, and the person that founded that organization was a classmate of mine here in DeLand High School. We played in the band together. She played clarinet and I played clarinet.
Oh.
So I went, my daughter saw a flyer back in, I think it was 1985, that there was a Black Health Women's Conference going on in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
So she got us reservation and we flew there. And as we were at the first reception, I heard somebody behind me calling out my name real loud. And it was my classmate.
Oh.
She had finished the university. She had finished her college work in Georgia, and she had moved to the Gainesville area where she married a gentleman in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me after we had time to get acquainted again, and I joined the organization. So I had an opportunity to go to Barbados, and we had conversation with the women there and about health. Had an opportunity to visit one of the universities there.
Yes.
And we were there in time for crop over. Crop over is a time when all the, that was in the summertime, and they finished with the sugar cane and there was the crops. Then they had a big festival down on the ocean front. And I got a chance to meet Angela Davis there. We went to the university and she was a speaker there. Then she stayed in the dormitory where we were. And so we were able to talk with her. But that was a nice time that I enjoyed. And just recently, a week ago, I had an opportunity to go to Washington and visit the new African American Museum of History and Culture.
Yes.
And that is something to behold.
How did you feel when you first walked in it?
Well, it just was amazing. Because when you start on the bottom floor, it's sad. And you see what happened with the slaves coming over on the ships, and they have collected so much to depict all of the periods. But by the time you get up to the fifth floor, you see where the progress, you've progressed, you've come along. And that was just really a thrill. And we stayed in there for 4 hours, but it just wasn't enough time. I need to go back again so I can have another couple of days to really go through it. It was very crowded on that Sunday afternoon that we went, but you don't bump into people. It's so large that there's space.
Yes.
So that was really a thrill.
If who would you say had perhaps the most influence on your life? And kind of a follow-up to that, what would you like to be personally remembered for?
I made a list at one time about the people that have influenced my life and were very supportive and encouraging. In my own community, I know the pastor of our church, Reverend S.W. White. I always looked up to him as a true man of God and could be very encouraging and supportive. I had aunts in my family that were very supporting. And my mother's mother came from the Demps family. And the men in the Demps family was very supporting of the females. And if there was any way that they could assist you right on up to the time you were an adult. They still was there for you, and they would let you know that. And these gentlemen, they were raised on the farm, and they moved away, and most of them kind of settled here in this area. And I'll tell you I'll show you what I mean when I say that they really looked out for the females in the family. Because when I got my Roosevelt presented my engagement ring, well, I wanted to show it to the family. And so I went over to an uncle over in DeLand, and he said, well, sister, you mean you want to get married now? I said, but Uncle, don't you think that I finished college, I have a job, don't you think I can get married now? And he started laughing. Yes, you can. And so we left there and came out to Lake Helen, and my uncle in Lake Helen had a little juke joint. So we went in there to tell him, Uncle George, I'm getting married. This is my fiance, Roosevelt Fowler. He said, well, I guess it's all right, but now you don't touch her now, because I have a 20/20. If things are not going right, you just bring her right back to her daddy. Wow. That was 1960. So they were supportive like that. They wanted you to, they were good with their wives and
Yes.
their sisters, and they just was like that. So some of the persons that I have mentioned to you that supported me to make sure that I got an education and could, those were people that have truly made a difference in my life. And then along the way, the friendships that I have gained from within my teaching profession, the teachers that I'm still friendly with and stay in touch with, and also just the community persons.
What would you like to be remembered? How would you like to be remembered?
Okay. I would like to be remembered as a person that cared for others, a person that respected others. I believe in kindness. I would say, as I have said to my grandchildren, remember, good manners will help to open up doors for you. I would like to be remembered as someone that will always reach out and give a helping hand like I received in my life. I would also say that have a plan in your mind for your life. And this can start at an early age. I always had the dream that one day I would be able to finish school. I had the dream that one day I would be able to go to college. And through persevering, and I was able to accomplish that with the help of other people. And I've tried to pass that on as I have come along this way, to share what was shared with me, so that someone else can have an opportunity to go further in their life. There may come a time when there's a bump in the road, but you go over that, or you go around it, brush yourself off, and continue to move forward.
Thank you so very much. This has been a wonderful opportunity to talk with you.
And thank
And
you.
with the full life that you have lived and are still living, we can't begin to put it in one interview. But thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Jackie. I appreciate you being the interviewer. And when my book comes out, you will be able to finish the rest of it.
Oh, good.